Hey everyone, how are you doing today? It's Makeda Valletta, and I'm live on my Instagram page, Makeda Valletta Travels. I will save this and repost it to my YouTube channel, Makeda Valletta Travels. So make sure you follow me in both places. In case you're unfamiliar with me, I am a native New Yorker who currently resides in Chicago, and I travel a lot in the country, out of the country, and when I travel, I'm really into immersing myself in the culture of a place. And a lot of times there are places I've been to many times before I even form an opinion. I'm cool, how are you? So the DC area, which some of you may or may not know, is also known as the DMV. So that's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And it's been a second home to me for many years now, okay? So I have family in the area, but I went to college in Delaware. So I went to college with a bunch of people who are from this area, and I have a lot of friends here. So a lot of my friends are in the DC area. So I've never done a video on the DMV. I did a video on Baltimore last year, and I didn't finish doing that video, but I'm much more familiar with the DC area. I spend more time here. So let me say that it's funny because I say I live in Chicago now, and some of you have been there, some of you haven't, but Chicago actually reminds me of a mixture of DC and New York. So one thing, about DC, it's there's a lot of successful black people here, okay? Probably more so than any other city, and that's also true with Maryland in general. Very black state, a lot of educated people. I think DC has more people with degrees than any other city in the country, I think. So it's a heavily educated city. However, and it's a place where, you see successful black people in Atlanta, you see successful black people in New York and in other cities, Chicago, but there's a large percentage of successful, educated black people in DC. A lot of it is government jobs, safe, government jobs. So, but one of the downfalls, I feel like, unlike Detroit, Atlanta, and Chicago, blacks in DC are not very business-minded. This is not a city where people have a hustle, entrepreneurial spirit at all. So it's kind of a waste because you have all these successful black Americans who have money, but they're not interested in investing in black business or any of that. They're basically like, they go to work, do their good government job. They go to happy hour every day. Happy hour is a big thing in DC. Out of any city I've ever been to, happy hour is a thing here. I think it has decreased since COVID because a lot of people are working from home. But they're at happy hour, brunch on the weekends, day parties. Okay, so they work and they like to be out. Okay, but just not very risky people or business entrepreneurial minded. They're kind of like, let me just go with the what is it, like whatever's cut out and okay. Now, because so many people here are government workers, a lot of them have like security clearances, and they can't be, even if they are crazy, they can't be acting crazy, okay? Because, they can't be late on their bills and all this stuff. You have a lot of people with these security clearances. And in DC, this is the one city that I've been to where when you ask people what they do, a lot of times they tell you stuff that you don't understand what they're saying. Like, I have several friends in DC that I've known for years, and they could tell me what they do and they can explain it, but I still be like, what? Like, just clueless. It just don't be. So there's a lot of that as well. Like, I remember in that show, Scandal. I didn't watch that show all the time, but that show to me was very DC. Okay, you just don't know what people do. You don't. It's funny because I have an aunt from Boston. My aunt is in her 60s, right? And she talked about how when she first came to DC, she might have been like 19, 20. She said she was shocked at all the black people she saw that were running things, okay? running just government. You go in government buildings, it's like mostly black. Okay, a lot of people don't know Homeland Security is mostly black. So there's that. However, yeah, you said you felt the same way when you lived up there. Very repetitive daily lifestyle. Yes. One thing I'm going to tell you about DC people, I went to college at the University of Delaware. So I went to college with a lot of people from Baltimore, DC, Philly, New Jersey, right? DC people, I remember back then, okay, whenever they found out that we were from New York, like, they would just automatically start hating and be like, oh, so you from New York, so you think you this and you think you all that, and blah, blah, blah. And they would just start hating. And I've had a lot of experience with that over the years in DC. Like, somebody finds out I'm from New York and they start talking shit. When I was in college, I was like, first of all, people in New York are not thinking about DC, okay? We're not hating on DC because you're not even in our radar. Like, you're not a factor. That's number one. But if you really want to talk about it, New York is way doper than DC, okay? If you really want to talk about it, like, we invented hip-hop. DC invented go-go. Nobody cares about go-go. No offense, DC, but nobody cares about that outside of DC, okay? I had never heard of go-go until I went to college. And I remember they played it on the campus, and everybody who's from Jersey, Philly, we didn't know what it was. So we stopped on the dance floor like, what is this? Because half the room was going crazy. The other half of us had no idea what it was. And I don't even think go-go is that great. But then I realized, oh, Doing the Butt from, what is that, School Days, or Doing the Butt? That was a go-go song. Okay, everybody knows that song. Now that I know go-go, I can hear it in some of early hip-hop. Like, LL Cool J has some songs that had go-go beats. But New York is worldwide. We weren't thinking about DC, okay? The thing about DC, okay, is that you have, and I remember as a kid coming down here, when I came down here as a kid, I had family here, but my mom, she's a labor organizer, and she's very much involved in politics, and she's brought buses of people down here for things, and my dad, he's a journalist, he was an activist involved in the civil rights movement. So when I was a kid, when I came here, I remember one time we came to meet with Jesse Jackson. My dad had to meet with Jesse Jackson about something, and I remember I had a picture with Jesse Jackson, okay, with my twin brother. But I thought I looked so cute that I cut myself out of I cut them out of the picture. I just wanted myself. I'm like, I don't want them in the picture. So I remember we were in his Rainbow Coalition office, and I remember my mom bringing us down here for, what was it, the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington, which I think was 1993. So I would come down here for stuff like that. And I remember as a kid thinking that the trains here, you know, they got on my nerves because I felt like they weren't efficient. Like, I felt like the trains here, I remember being a kid and getting off at the Washington Monument stop or something, and I felt like we had to walk 20 blocks. Like, I just felt like, as a kid, felt like the trains, I didn't like the trains here. Now, there is a train public transportation system in D.C. As an adult, okay, when I've come to D.C., I just don't take public transportation here. I don't like it because I remember years ago when I would be in D.C., friends of mine who lived here, like, I could be in D.C., and I'm talking to a D.C. friend, and I'd be like, oh, how much, like, let's say I want to take the bus to their house or whatever, and I would be like, oh, how much is it going to cost? And they could never tell me. They never knew the price. You know, you go in the train station here, and there's like a whole chart of prices depending on where you're going, what time it is. Then you need to keep your card that you use to come into the train. You need to keep it to get out of the station. It's like that in the Bay Area too, I think. But you need it to get it out the station, which is retarded because, like, you might make a mistake and throw it away or just lose it, okay? And so now you're gonna have to pay all this money to get out. You can't just get out. Or if you pay the wrong fee, okay, you paid the wrong price. Now you're trying to get out and you can't. It's stopping you. It's so annoying and stupid, okay? And then the people that work in the train stations in DC are mean, okay? So just one thing I'm going to say to you about DC as well. Terrible service, okay? Out of any city that I've ever traveled to in my life, okay? DC has the worst service, and I'm talking about every single business. The restaurants, the car wash, the everything. Which is crazy to me because I'm like, this is a city with a lot of important people. You never know who you're dealing with. Like in New York, I remember when I was in high school, I worked in a sporting goods store. And they used to tell us you never know who you're dealing with. Like supermodels used to come in there, but you didn't recognize them when they were just in their regular garb. And they're like, when you're in New York, you never know who you're dealing with. There's a lot of important people. I feel like that's true with DC. So it's like, but the service here sucks. Okay, that's one thing about DC that irks my nerves to no end. Terrible service, but excellent food. Okay, it's a very good food city. I feel like Baltimore as well. Baltimore and DC are both two of my favorite food cities, okay? I actually like the food here way better than New York, okay? New York is not one of my favorite food cities. It's not in my top 10, okay? Probably not my top 20, okay? No, this is coming from a native New Yorker. I'm not a big fan of New York City food. I think it's okay and overpriced. And I'm a lover of American food as well, and DC and Baltimore have so much good American food, as does Chicago, as does Houston. But the food here, top tier. Okay, very good food. It's a very segregated city. Okay, so not just racially. Like, people always talk about Chicago, and they say, "Oh, Chicago's one of the most segregated cities in America." DC is way worse. Okay, in Chicago, I see mixed groups of friends all the time. I see interracial couples all the time. You don't see that in DC. Out of all the years and times that I've been here, a white person has never spoken to me in DC. White people do not mingle with black people here at all. You never see them sitting at the same table. You would never see them having a conversation. Okay? Even though most of the white people in DC voted for Obama and it's very highly educated, black and white people do not mingle. When I go to stuff in DC, it's all black. Like, it'll be black Americans, Caribbeans, and West Africans that all fuck with each other. They all hang out. There's a lot of Ethiopians in the DC area. They don't mingle with the West Africans, the Caribbeans, and the black Americans. They're in their own world. They don't mingle with us at all. The Hispanics in DC are invisible. It's not like there's a Hispanic population, but it's not strong like it is in New York, Miami, Houston, Chicago, LA. Like, where you know when you come to the city, like, the Hispanic-speaking population have a strong presence. You see them. You're really interacting with them. It's not like that in DC. There's a Hispanic population, but they're totally invisible. Not mingling with the blacks and the whites either, okay? So it's a very segregated city. Hold on a minute. My phone is about to die. Okay. It's also a lot more dangerous than people think. Oh, no, the segregation. The segregation also has to do with socioeconomic. So in New York or Atlanta, even Chicago, you'll see mixed groups of people who are of social, let's say with black people. You'll have people of different socioeconomic classes. It could be highly educated with money and street people or regular people, and they'll all mingle in the same place and maybe party together. And DC is not like that. The black professionals, they do not mingle with the DC dusties. Okay, no offense, but street people in DC are pretty dusty. Unlike New York, where you have people who are like hood people who are like fly. Hood dudes in DC aren't fly, and neither are the chicks. I'm sorry. If you drive through the hoods of DC, you do not see attractive chicks and you do not see attractive dudes. I just have never seen it. People look really bad. They look really dusty and really bad. That's one thing that makes New York unique. You drive through the hood in New York, you'll see attractive chicks and attractive dudes, okay? But no. Anyhow, the hood people and educated don't mingle. DC people can be very pretentious, where when they meet you, they instantly want to know, what do you do? What are your degrees in? Like, they want to know that just to even judge if you're worth talking to, okay? More so than any other city I've been to. I did a video from my other Instagram page, The Body Scientist, where I talked about access to a healthy, active lifestyle in DC. I do videos like that with a lot of places that I go to. So you can check that out more, because I'm talking about the food systems and access to certain things. But I will say with medical cannabis, like, you know, I'm definitely a medical cannabis consumer. I don't like to go places where cannabis is illegal, which is making me love traveling around the U.S. even more. And of course, it's not legal in the U.S. Every state has different laws. But one thing that I discovered, okay, I thought that if you had a medical cannabis card in one state, I thought that most states took medical cannabis cards from other states. Okay, so I thought, like, if you have I have a card from Illinois. I thought, oh, I can use it in Pennsylvania, I can use it in New York, I can use it in Virginia. Like, that's what I thought. But I found out this trip that that's not true. Okay, but DC is unique. There's a few states where you can do that. Okay, a few, but very few. Not any of the states I travel to. Okay, it might be like Kansas and I don't know, but. In DC, what makes DC's medical cannabis program unique is that you can self-certify yourself. So unlike other states where you have to go to a medical doctor, you have to get them to sign off on your qualifying condition and say that you are eligible to get medical cannabis, you have to pay for that. DC, you don't have to do that. You can self-certify yourself. So you don't need a doctor to certify you for medical cannabis. You could just say, I need cannabis for whatever condition. I need it, I'm saying I need it, and that's it. And you can get a card, like if you're a visitor in DC, you can get a temporary medical cannabis card. Okay, it could be for 3 days. I think a 3-day card is $10. Wait, I had the prices up on my thing before. Hold on, let me find it. I want to tell you the prices. They were good. So let me see. So when I was here in the fall, I did that. One dispensary I really love in DC is one that's called Tacoma Wellness Center. It's in Tacoma Park, DC, which is an area that I really like. So a 3-day medical cannabis card in DC is $10. 30 days is $20. 90 days is $50, 180 days is $75, and 365 days is $100, okay? That's cheaper than any place else, okay? Other states, you might have to pay $100 for your meeting with the doctor, then you have to pay the state for a card. So DC is just that, and you can be an out-of-state person and still get these cards, okay? The rules for getting medical cannabis cards are different in every state. The rules around medical cannabis and recreational cannabis is different in every state. The Virginia, Maryland, and DC all have medical cannabis, okay? It's legal in all those places. Maryland now has recreational and medical. DC and Virginia is just medical, so you need a card. So I'm thinking, so I went to a dispensary in DC, and DC takes cards from every other state. You have to look at the rules. There's a couple of states. I think Virginia, you need to have a Virginia license plate. In order for DC to take a Virginia card, they also need a Virginia driver's license. So there's like a couple things like that. But basically, DC takes cards from every state. I used my Illinois card. But then when I was in Arlington, which is like right next to DC, it's like 10 minutes away, they told me, no, you have to have a Virginia medical cannabis card. And then I learned the same thing was true in Maryland. Then I learned the same thing was true in New York and Pennsylvania, and I did not realize that, okay? In Michigan, because I'm thinking, like, even when I drive from Chicago to New York, I drive through Ohio, which has medical. They just got recreational. I drive through Michigan for a little bit, and when you're in Michigan, there's nothing but dispensaries everywhere in Michigan. Like, Michigan is like California, okay? It really is. And I dropped through Michigan for a bit, Pennsylvania, which is only medical. And when you have the medical card, you usually save on taxes. So I thought that now if I drive to New York, I can stop and get cannabis in Pennsylvania or Michigan. But that's not the case, okay? The states where it's recreational, like Michigan, yes, I can get some just recreationally, okay? So there's that. But so DC is unique in the way that you can self-certify yourself. You can be visiting in town, okay, and get a 3-day or 30-day or 90-day medical cannabis card and save on all the taxes and get discounts. There's a lot of knowledgeable people about medical cannabis in the DC area, okay? There's actually a woman, this Nigerian couple, who I know from the Real Housewives of Potomac, okay? Wendy Isofo and Eddie Isofo. And Wendy is highly educated, 3 degrees, professor at Johns Hopkins. And her husband just started a cannabis brand, okay? And I just saw them post that they're going to be opening up a Nigerian themed restaurant in Maryland with a cannabis consumption lounge in the back. Okay, so I think that's dope. There's a lot of, when you go to the gyms in DC, just Maryland, okay, I'm going to say DC, but also in Maryland, because when I go to the gyms, I'm usually in Maryland, okay. I usually go to LA Fitness in the Maryland, different LA Fitnesses in Maryland outside of DC, and they're all black. You know, the only other time I've seen that is in Atlanta, but DC, you know, it's like all black, all like black people with some sense, okay. I mean, we know Baltimore is one of the most dangerous cities, but outside of Baltimore, I'm just going to say that Maryland in general has a good crop of black Americans, okay, who are just educated, have good sense, you know, just good black people, which I love because that's what I feel comfortable around. I don't do hood rats too much, okay? Not to say that those aren't here too, okay? Because the last time I was in DC, which was last fall, I drove down a street that was like a couple blocks from where I'm staying in Northeast, and I drove down a block with some shady looking dudes, and me being from New York, like, let me tell you, the hoods in other people's cities are a lot worse than New York, okay? The hoods in a lot of cities, okay? Miami, you know, Miami, New Orleans, Philly, Oakland, a lot of them are a lot scarier than anything I've seen in New York. Now, DC, I was driving down the street and these dudes looked shady. It was the daytime. And it was sunny. And I just saw the buildings. I don't know if it was the projects, but it was the most depressing looking buildings I've ever seen. And my friend, and we drove down this block, and these dudes just looked like, just everything about that block just had bad energy. And my friend's like, oh, don't worry, like, you know, they're not scary, like, they're harmless. Basically, like, DC hood dudes, they're not really scary like that, you know, they're just whatever. So he told me that, so I'm like, okay. Later that night, I went to go do something, I'm coming back. Navigation led me on that block, it was dark. And there was no lights on the block, so I turned on the street. As soon as I turned on the street, the dudes that were on the block scattered like roaches. And I was like, fuck, I remember I was on the phone with a friend of mine from New York, and I'm like, damn, like, I didn't want to be back on that block again. It just was bad energy. And I was just talking to my friend in New York about how, you know, shady DC hood energy is, right? I come to my friend's house. 10 minutes later, we heard so many gunshots, okay? So many gunshots that we didn't know if it was gunshots or not. It was so exaggerated. Next day, we find out 100 shots were fired on that block. Okay, I think 7 people got shot. I had just drove down that block like 10 minutes prior, okay? And come to find out, there's a black girl who was on her way to college, or she was a college student who got killed on that block a few years ago by a stray bullet, okay? And then I leave DC, and then the next day, a day or two after, my friend tells me he was downtown DC with his friends, and that they left at a 7-Eleven and somebody got shot, okay? So DC, when you look, 'cause ever since I've been, for the past 7-8 years, every single year, I look at a list of the most dangerous cities in the country, the cities with the highest homicide rates. And I look at several sources, because people come up with they have different ways of calculating things. DC is always in the top 10, and DC is always above Chicago, okay? So people think that, like, Chicago is the murder capital, but Chicago's never in the top 20. St. Louis and Detroit flip-flop for number 1 for years, okay? I remember when I found out about Detroit, I was surprised because I had been to Detroit a lot, and I don't love Detroit. I love the people, don't love the city, but I didn't see people there to even think that it was dangerous like that, because Detroit seems so empty. But Detroit and St. Louis flip-flop for number 1. You have Baltimore be in the top 3, okay? Baltimore and Memphis be in the top 5. That's a given, okay? Sometimes the top 3, depending on what list you're looking at, consistently. Baltimore and DC were the murder capitals when I was in college, okay? Both of them. DC has cleaned up a bit, but it still be in the top 10. So is Atlanta, so I'm just saying that to say that, but it's like when I'm in DC, it doesn't feel dangerous. Like, I don't feel, it reminds me of Chicago in the sense that it's very clean, and not a lot of traffic, it's not like super busy. And Chicago doesn't feel dangerous to me. Like when I'm in Chicago, I don't ever feel, I've been in Chicago for 7 years and some months. I've never been in Chicago like, oh my God, I feel so scared. Like never. Okay. And I've driven Uber in Chicago and in the hood and everything. But I know that stuff happens, but I just don't, it's not what, look, when people come visit Chicago, they're usually surprised that this is the city that they're hearing about that's so dangerous because it doesn't look like it or feel like it, even though stuff pops off. And so DC is kind of like that too, where it doesn't, when I'm in DC, I don't feel like, oh my God, I'm in danger, like I'm in such a dangerous city. But it'd be in the top 10. And then I always felt like with DC, I always felt like, so people can think, oh, there's the CIA, the FBI, the this, the that, the this and that. It's the Capitol. It's so heavily surveilled. But the New Yorker in me, especially the post 9/11 New Yorker, I always felt like, New York is heavily surveilled. I'm really surprised that New York, nobody has blown up Times Square or something worse. I'm really surprised it hasn't happened. But whoever's watching over New York, they are really surveilling it, okay? And ever since 9/11, you can go into like certain train stations and you see military, not just the police, but you'll see like straight up, like you go in Penn Station, you see 3 cops over there, military with military weapons, cops, military, like all over the place, standing there watching. In New York, there's millions of people not already in the city, but there's millions of people coming in and out the city every single day, whether it be on planes, whether it be people driving in from New Jersey, from Pennsylvania, from upstate, whatever. There's millions of people coming in the city every day. And so it's a place that's easy to cause great chaos and very easy, okay? Like the fact that New York hasn't had a mass shooting is like, it's so easy. And New York is not a gun crazy city, okay? It's very different than the rest of America in that way. But DC, I've always felt like wasn't that, like, I always felt like it wasn't, like, people here aren't paying attention. The people who are in charge, like, they're not, like, when Obama was president, people kept jumping over the White House fence, like, and being over the fence for, like, 10 minutes. Like, how? Or you'd be in the train station in D.C., Union Station, and you would see, like, 2 cops, whereas New York, you saw a lot more. Or the cops in D.C. don't really bother you, which is good, okay? You never see anybody protesting about the police in D.C. They pretty much don't bother people, okay? They really don't. So they're probably the way that Miami police in South Beach are the most irritating, annoying, like trying to just, give you tickets for just whatever. They're like hawks. Like, I hate the police in South Beach in Miami. DC police are the opposite. They're really like not really paying attention to much. And so when January 6th happened, it wasn't surprising to me because I've been saying that they don't, like, that would never have happened in New York, okay? They would have never, the NYPD and the people that guard New York, they would have never allowed people to bust into the United Nations like that, like, never would have happened. So to me, I've always seen DC as an incompetent city, okay? Like, I like a boss city. New York is boss city number 1, meaning they handle shit, okay? When 9/11 happened, that was major, okay? And nothing skipped a beat, okay? Even that day, they wouldn't let people, Manhattan is an island, they wouldn't let people come on off the island. There are many people who go to school in Manhattan who don't live there. There are many people who work in Manhattan who don't live there. There are many people who are in other boroughs, who live in Manhattan, and still nobody got stuck anywhere. I don't know, like, there was no chaos, and they handled it like a boss. You have a city like Atlanta, they get an inch of snow, people have to leave their cars on the highway for 2 days. Like, that's incompetent. DC, when it snows here, there's several times I've seen it snow in DC and it was barely any snow, and like the city is shut down for like a month. And I'm just like, for what? Like, it's a little city, just shovel the snow, So I've always seen DC as like incompetent, and January 6th proved that, okay? That wouldn't go down in New York, okay? So, but whatever, that's just notes about DC. But for the most part, I feel like, there are crazy people everywhere. I feel like DC, out of every place that I've been to, has like the least amount of crazy people because most of them are government workers and they just can't be crazy. Like, they can't be doing crazy shit and getting in trouble, and, it just is not good for their jobs. So if they are crazy, they really, like, I guess, find a way to contain that. So there's a lot of, like, sane, educated people. They're just, but DC can be very cliquey. I know some cool people here, but I don't think people, like, out of all the years I've been in DC, nobody compliments me. Nobody's like, oh, I like your hair. I like your outfit. Never happens, okay? People compliment me all the time in New York. People compliment me all the time in Chicago. DC people don't do that. DC is the kind of place where I feel like if you drop something, nobody's going to tell you, okay? In New York, they'll tell you. If you drop something and somebody sees it, they're going to tell you. DC people, like I said, the white people here act like black people are my friend said they act like we're a light pole. Like they really don't see us. So it's just like, whatever. So it's super segregated to me. Nobody ever mentions that about DC. Anthony Bourdain mentioned that. And when he came to DC, that was the first thing he mentioned in his intro. Anthony Bourdain is a New York, New Jersey guy. And so he instantly noticed that. And I noticed that. It's super segregated. Like, to me, DC is one of the most segregated cities I've been to in this country. Or just period. Okay. So yeah, so those are the things. I did my video on a healthy, active lifestyle. So you can check that video out on my page, The Body Scientist. So the good things, highly educated black people, a lot of money here, like safe money, but the people aren't very business-minded. Access to medical cannabis is great. You can self-certify yourself, even if you're from out of state. Great food here, terrible service here. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I need to say? There's public transportation here. I'm not a fan of it because it just doesn't make sense, and the people that work there aren't nice. I don't like how dark the platform is. I hate DC public transportation, but it exists. So if you're in the city, you should be able to get around, fine without a car, I guess, but I just can't do it here. The DC area is hilly, which I like. One thing I don't like about the whole DC area is that there's too much modern, there's a lot of these modern buildings that are like communities where it's like the building has a gym and a pool and office rooms and all this stuff. I'm not a fan of those buildings because they're just too enclosed. The architecture is cheap. It's not that nice. Everything's an open floor concept. To me, it's a scam. I'm not a fan of that. And there's too much of that in the DC area, okay? That's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. The whole area, to me, so there's cute areas. Like, I like Old Town, Virginia. Old Town, Alexandria. Old Town, Alexandria is beautiful, walkable, has nice architecture. Arlington, Virginia is a nice little area. So there's a lot of nice little areas. I love Tacoma Park. You have Silver Spring. So there's a lot of nice little towns or cities around DC in Maryland and Virginia. But it's like there's not a lot of just regular buildings. Like, I like pre-war older buildings. That's one reason why I moved to Chicago. Chicago has modern and older. DC, it's like there's these modern, buildings that are these communities, which to me aren't that nice, and I just am not a fan of that. Or it's like little apartments that are kind of like they're almost like apartments and houses. I don't know how to explain it, but they're not like big sturdy brick buildings with like wood floors and high ceilings. A lot of the places in DC have low ceilings. I'm not a huge fan of the architecture here on the inside, and I'm not going to say that there's no nice architecture here. I'm not going to say that. Maybe if you're rich in Georgetown. I'm just not a huge fan of DC architecture on the inside. On the outside, it depends on where you are. There's some areas in the city that has cute architecture. Let me see. Yeah, DC is kind of expensive, okay, to live. I think when it comes to food, it's actually reasonably priced for how good the food is. And Baltimore is even cheaper, and the food is amazing. So, Baltimore is like 45 minutes away. So, and somebody on here asked me what was my favorite food here, and there's many things that I like, but I love Maryland crab cake, and I feel like once you've had crab cakes in this area, you cannot eat them anywhere else. Like, nobody makes crab cakes as good as like Baltimore, Maryland. I actually like the seafood in Maryland better than New Orleans, okay? I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans, and I love that city, but everything in New Orleans is Creole seasonings, Creole seasonings, Creole seasonings. It's a lot of soupy stuff, like etouffee and gumbo and stuff. Like, there's good food in New Orleans, but I like Maryland seafood better. And then I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Yeah. And one thing is, like, you know, a lot of people who come to New York, they're coming to New York. There's a lot of go-getters who come to New York. They're coming there for a mission to accomplish something. DC can be like that too when it comes to people who are trying to get laws passed. And I always respect the people that do that work, okay? So I'm getting ready to graduate from a master's program at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, medical cannabis science and therapeutics, and that was the first program in this country. Now there's several medical cannabis and cannabis science programs in an undergraduate and graduate level, but that one was the first one. And it being in Maryland, in the DMV area, there's also a huge component to creating people who will get involved with legislation, okay, which is really important. I'm not huge, I respect people that do that work because I grew up around people that do that work, and I know how hard it is, and I respect it. And I'm so the reason why laws are changing in this country is because of those people. I don't know that I'm built for that, but I am an educator and a practitioner. And, you know, I know that that work is very important. So, you know, the DC area, you do have a lot of people who are here with that, like, let's get some laws changed and passed and stuff. So, I think I've said everything I need to say about the DMV area. Yeah. And then if you're here, if you ever come here, like, Richmond is not far. I've been to Richmond once. That city, I can't speak on it because I've only been there once. Charlottesville, which might be like an hour and a half. I like that area. That's where UVA is. You have Philly, which is 2 hours away. And New York is 4 hours away. So anyhow, I'm done. I think I've said everything I need to say. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I need to say about DC? Because every time I do a video, I remember things I meant to say. I think that's it. So, have you been to DC? What are your thoughts on the city? Anything you want to add, please do. Make sure you follow me on my YouTube page, Makeda Blooded Travels, and on Instagram. Okay? See you guys later, and have a good day. Bye.